that suit. Are you Foxhound?
That's right.
Foxhound was disbanded. Huh? Where were you before Foxhound? Delta Force?
I was part of the Army's Force 21 trials.
Force 21? That's about tactical IT deployment, right? Any field experience?
No, not really.
So this is your first.
I've had extensive training, the kind that's indistinguishable from the real thing.
Like what?
Sneaking mission 60, weapons 80, advanced...
VR, huh?
But realistic in every way.
A virtual grunt of the digital age, that's just great.
That's far more effective than live exercises.
You don't get injured in VR, do you? Every year a few soldiers die in field exercises.
There's pain sensation in VR and even a sense of reality and urgency. The only difference is it isn't actually happening.
That's the way they want you to think, to remove you from the fear that goes with battle situations. War is a video game. What better way to raise the ultimate soldier?
Throughout history, the militaries of the world have tried to better equip their soldiers for combat. Back in the day, white cloth was used for target shooting. Nowadays, pretty much everyone uses human-shaped, or at least human-depicting targets. Well, much like how the US Army tried to weaponize a Nerf football, they actually did that, they eventually turned their eyes towards the world of gaming. So in the year 1999, some boys at the US Army's science and technology community noticed a large portion of their recruits grew up playing video games. So they got to work on the project through a US Army University affiliated research center called Institute for Creative Technologies, ICT for short. Work began in May of 2000 AD with a project titled C4. Work began in May of 2000 AD with a project titled C4 led by ICT Creative Director James Corus alongside Sony ImagineWorks and Pandemic Studios. Between PlayStation legal restrictions and the replay features of the Xbox, the latter was chosen for development. However, as part of the deal for using the Xbox, they would have to make a commercial product as well. However, the team figured that making one package for both markets would fail on both fronts, so they instead made two versions, one for the military and one for public release. On the Xbox versions, you can still access the Army's copy. It's like the base game, but stripped of various characterization features. And fun. As development continues, the name would change into C-Force 2001, and ultimately Full Spectrum Warrior in 2003. There were later military-exclusive versions of this project too, Full Spectrum Command from Quicksilver Software. There was also another made for US and Singapore, used titled Full Spectrum Leader. But that's enough history lesson for now. Let's lace up our boots, remember the 4 Fs, and storm Zekistan, M249's blastin'. The setup for Full Spectrum Warriors, a series of terrorist attacks have swept across Europe and Asia. Following the trail of bombs, Western intelligence places the origin of the terrorists to the fictional nation of Zekistan in Central Asia. Following US actions in Iraq and Afghanistan, the terrorist elements flee to Zekistan and were granted access by the dictator of the country, Mohammed Jabbar al-Afad. Rolls off the tongue like buttered poetry. This being early 2000s, no one's ready to glass a country for housing some heretics. Instead, they opt for the hammer approach of mass-scale invasion. This is where the player finds themselves, commanding 2 fire teams through a dozen missions against Zekistan forces. While the game's story is rather light and it doesn't truly get rolling until the halfway point, the members of your fire team make up the heart of the game. The opening intro gives you a quick rundown of the soldiers. While I can't remember most of their names, I can fondly remember their quotes and random bits of dialogue. Even their uniforms give a bit of information as to who their characters are. The leader Bravo team, for example, sports evidence reminding us that he was a cop in New York. I mean, look at Blue Bloods. You can see him right there. The story of the game isn't much to write home about, but the conversations among the squad members is what makes you care about seeing the end of their journey.
AH-64D Apache! That's the shizzy, my nizzy! Yo!
Phillips, newsflash. You are not now, nor have you ever been black.
Oh, word? Blackness is a state of mind, my brother.
Lock it up, soldiers. There's only one color in this army. Green.
Brown.
Brown. Brown what?
Not that I'd ever contradict you, but right about now, the Army's color is all brown.
That said, what will you be doing on this journey? Well, shortly after crossing the border, your convoy comes under fire, and after rescuing a fellow soldier, you get your first real objective. Sweep and clear the enemy. Boys, light them up. I like the double take he gave there. It's like, oh, those Americans. Huh, that's weird. Tourists. Wait, those were Americans. Oh god, no! While there are various objectives that I'll touch on later, you'll mostly be sweeping out and eliminating enemies. The way the game expects you to do this is reminiscent of Brothers in Arms. Only here you don't do the shooting directly, instead you command one squad at a time and set up the squad's firing lines. While one squad pins an enemy, the other squad can flank around and secure the kill. Occasionally you'll get lucky and catch 1 or 2 in the open, or an enemy will be standing on the high ground without any cover. That said, you have 2 modes of fire. Point fire, which will see your squad taking occasional shots of opportunity. It's enough to keep the enemy's head down and catch targets in the open, while not depleting all your ammo. The alternative is suppressive fire, which will leave you high and dry more often than not.
Press it, my sig. Yes, sir.
Your range of tools also extend to various explosives, namely frags and M203s, both of which can trivialize the need for the 4 Fs at multiple points. The game insists that they're rare and not to overuse them. However, I channeled my inner Megumin with little trouble. Honestly, there were points where I just strolled through with one squad. You also have smoke, which is often a more economic alternative to suppression, and occasionally you're granted airstrikes, however that's a rare occurrence, and usually restricted to taking out enemy armor. There's also advanced movement, like having a squad move in pairs while aiming their rifles in a particular direction. Outside the tutorial, I think I used it a total of 2 times? Now enemies, they don't move much in this game. They're rather static once they find a spot, so suffering damage is mostly on the player moving a squad into a bad position or simply not noticing an enemy. You could get a wounded member, which doesn't do much, but you're more likely when outflanked to get a downed soldier. If a soldier is down, you have a small window of time to pick them up before they're KIA, which is a mission failure. The only other way to fail is if 2 soldiers go down or a mission objective is failed. 2 soldiers going down means if 1 from Alpha and 1 from Bravo go down, game over, Sonny Jim. So yeah, It pays off to mainly keep one squad in support of the other when moving against the enemy. Now if a player is down and you get them up before they bleed out, you need to hoof it all the way back to Eric King from Dexter. This point periodically moves up to support the player. From this station you can get down soldiers back in the fight as well as resupply. One thing I found rather annoying, and I wish was a feature, was how the player moved his squads. In the thick of combat or moving into unknown territory, it functions fine. However, the moment you need to backtrack or cover already cleared ground, it can become rather tedious. If you watch the stream, you'd be no stranger to my suggestion of a call over button as well as a return to CASEVAC button. Many of the missions are linear, so instead of slowly moving an already slowed down fireteam back and forth, you should be able to just press one button and send them back to the CASEVAC, and another while controlling the opposite team and move them up to that team's position. That said, the CASEVAC truck does tend to move up with each completed objective, so often it would simply prove quicker to push on just that little bit and have the truck come to you. Now when a member is down, it does slightly reduce the team's effectiveness, but the only member to largely affect the team with their removal is the Grenadier, as without him, you have no access to the tool of divine wrath, the M249. I suppose the saw gunner being down reduces suppression capability, but I never noticed. This being a pandemic game, they have some nice explosions, and the sound is great. Rifles crack, grenades go boom, and the music is solid. One strange oddity though is the physics. Now typically, stuff isn't too bad. I streamed this game off my Xbox One, and while there were exaggerated ragdoll physics, it wasn't until a few missions in I started witnessing the stranger side of war. I'll get to this shit in a moment. The game also has destructible cover. It's there, I didn't use it much, but I got a grin on my face blowing up a crate to kill a target. Each mission has a healthy amount of checkpoints, however these are manual, and if you miss them it can lead to losing a fair amount of time. That said, the levels do seem to get shorter as they go on. The mission-to-mission stuff is handled by a Lieutenant Phillips. I'm sure he has a promising career ahead of him, devoid of any controversy. He's often the one to give you instructions. If you're ever lost, you just need to call in to be reminded. Usually there's a voice, but for some reason the Xbox version glitched out, and I was stuck reading text. In addition to the fireteam view, you can also pull out PDA for a somewhat useful overhead view. You can call in recon, but I forgot to use it, and whenever I remembered, they weren't available. In addition to Alpha and Bravo, you'll often have a third fireteam attached. This Charlie team can consist of anything from an engineer sent to find stinger caches or a team of rangers. Yeah, the player's just one gear in a massive machine. You'll be doing more grunt work and a lot less Task Force 141 stuff, though it is interesting to draw parallels between this game's missions and the actual Gulf War. While it can seem like it's just your two fire teams, you'll often see other allied forces. One part has you mowing down targets flushed out of a building by some rangers, another has you pitted against enemy armor and needing to eliminate the infantry support so your armor can clear the way. It's fun to be solving problems and operating in ways that aren't the more typical commando style. This is a rather glitchy game, or at least on PC. While I got the audio glitch on the Xbox, my time playing through the PC version was plagued with dead enemies still standing, and other problems I'll get to eventually. So with all that said, I'm going to be discussing the story of the game. This isn't really a title to go into wanting a complex narrative, as it's roughly straightforward. That said, if you still wish to avoid spoilers, skip to the time marked on screen, or use the timestamps in the description. So a few missions into the game, you start to get more plot stuff outside of just the overall story. Namely, after you find a mass grave that shows the rumors of genocide are true. The game's story is roughly divided into 3 parts. The first is a push for the airport. This kicks off with your convoy being ambushed, and you tasked with pushing through alongside Bradley's support and the occasional airstrike. The second is when names start being thrown around. You assault Alafad's palace with the goal of eliminating him. You track down a lieutenant of Alafad's forces in time to see him executed, but they must be preserving ammo as the single shot used only managed to wound the man. So while Alafad flees, you manage to get the LT of the CASEVAC. The third act of the game kicks off well. When moving to CASEVAC, you see a Joint Stars plane crashing. I'm pretty sure it's meant to be the one you see at the start of the game. Well, you fight your way to the plane's crash site just in time to see the survivors be taken away. Now with the pilot's lives at risk, you go to rescue them alongside count them, two Rangers. Now this portion of the game differs greatly from the rest. It's borderline a power trip moment. So throughout the game you've had to struggle around cover. Apart from cars and boxes, not much is destructible. You're basically forced to move a squad around cover or just spam M249 Chan and gamble on the splash damage. With the Rangers, however, enemy cover is non-existent. So long as the Rangers aren't receiving direct fire, they can nail enemies behind cover. Any cover.
Just like that. That didn't take long. That didn't take long. Yes, sir. Yeah, son of a bitch. One left for us to worry about.
This trivialized the final push toward Al-Afad. I'm not sure if the devs were running out of time or simply wanted to give the player a fun send-off. I also have questions about who the people with RPGs are firing at, and who the hell is operating the trains. Well, you eventually corner Al-Afad and call in one last airstrike. And what a win it is. I actually really like the victory screen. More games, they need victory screens like this. In the end, the human rights violations were discovered and only a few unnamed people died. We can assume most of that was from the crash. The game doesn't do a great job of having stakes. I mean, saving the pilots is good and all, motivation-wise, but there was nothing known about them. Maybe it was just me, but I got more of a tense sensation from a squad losing a man or even the lieutenant being gunned down. That said, this isn't actually the ending. No, there's 2 more epilogue missions, and oh boy, this is where I had trouble. You're with the Rangers again, and double as many enemies. Well, the mission is simple enough. With the death of his father, Al-Hamal has regrouped the remaining forces, including the Black Wind Brigade. His first plan is to broadcast propaganda, which is what the first half is based around. Simply get close to the tower and wait for the strike. You don't mark it, and honestly, I'm not sure why we were needed to clear out the infantry. We didn't stop any RPGs or the like. Second mission is a final push on a mosque housing the Black Wind Brigade and Al-Hamal. Here's where I really hit some game-breaking glitches. Getting a soldier down was funky in the base game, however here the bullets hit like an uppercut from Superman.
There's a starman waiting in the sky. He'd like to come and meet us, but he thinks he'd blow our minds. There's a starman waiting in the sky. He's told us not to blow it, 'cause he knows it's all worthwhile.
I've had men fly halfway across the map, to the point I was surprised they still had collision. That was at least a second soldier. No, the worst is when a soldier was hit, and he was flung into a zone right near the opening where I couldn't go. Keep in mind, I couldn't go, but the game spawned 2 enemy soldiers there. Because of where he landed, I was forced to restart. Also, so many enemies would be killed and simply remain standing. I largely noticed these problems in the epilogue. Plowing through, I eventually made it to the end and finished the epilogue. With the death of Al-Hamal, his younger brother Colonel Samir, who was thought to be dead at this point, comes into power. He expresses that he will work democratically with the other nations and move away from his father and brother's tyrannical rule. I'll be honest, I think this is less change of heart and more oh dear Allah stop airstriking me. So yeah, that's why I invested in the stock of glass, because when we finally, oh hi there, you must have skipped the spoilers, you pretty much missed nothing. Anyways, closing thoughts about this game, there's simply nothing else on the market like it. Apart from the sequel, there's SOCOM Tactical Strike, but that's for another day. The concept of the 4 Fs is brothers in arms, however this modern war tactical RTS urban combat game is, well, it's something unique. Sure, there's some controversy, but I'd love to see a remaster, or perhaps some new IP that goes for this style. This game isn't particularly long, the early missions seem the longest, and come the end it's basically just moving over a street or 2, and then ending. The last mission is a power fantasy, and the moment-to-moment isn't particularly hard either. That said, the game is short, but sweet. I had a blast playing through despite the glitches. The game is still available on Steam, and Xbox copies are backwards compatible. It doesn't look bad despite its age, and the gameplay isn't archaic in the least. The worst aspect simply comes down to how non-dynamic the enemy is. They don't attempt to flank unless scripted, they don't seek cover if above the player, and they don't react to grenades. Also, the game is rather 2D in the sense that everything you do is flat. You are never given the option of taking the high ground on the enemy. While rare, there are instances of stairs leading to paths on a second floor. You are simply restricted from using them. The handful of attempts at boss fights are simple puzzles, but do emphasize the usage of both squads. So yes, if you want a unique strategy game, be sure to check this one out. Given its age, the price of a copy can't be too high. You can probably find a physical copy for $5. While on Steam it only costs $10. Hell, you can snag the sequel at normal price with the original for $15. Unless the sequel dropped the ball something major. I see that as a steal. Just remember to use M249 Chan.